This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District PTSA.
Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Ellie Rosenblum. I am the PTSA Special Education Rep for the district, as well as Jackie Liebman, who's also here tonight. And we'd like to thank the French Road Building Chairs for inviting us and having us here to talk to all of you tonight. Obviously, this is being recorded, and part of this is a couple different reasons, but it's great to have this information out and available, and it will be on the website as well as on a YouTube channel for you to refer back to, so you don't have to be constantly taking notes. If there's something, you can always refer back to that recording. But it's also a great way for people who are not able to attend tonight to be able to view it. Just keep in mind that things change very rapidly in the field of education, so what is pertinent to today might not a year or two from now. So if you do refer back to it, you might want to just double check once you're in another building or even back into this building with a younger child to make sure that that information is still correct. So obviously we will have it recorded. There will be plenty of opportunity. Please ask as many questions as you would like. But if it is something that's particular to a student or a very specific scenario, if you want to wait until the end when we turn the recording off, you can certainly ask those questions later so that it is not available on the YouTube channel for everyone to view and hear over and over again as much as they'd like. So thank you again for coming, and I would like to introduce Christine Treasure.
Hi.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm Christine Treasure, and I'm the Assistant Director for Humanities here in Brighton. And in a previous life, I was the Assistant Principal at Council Rock for several years. And in this current role, one of the areas of my oversight is our response to intervention process, as well as our academic intervention services. And I work very collaboratively with our building and other building administrators at Council Rock, French Road, and TCMS. So we're going to jump in. Now, one of the things that in talking with your PTSA reps about some of the thoughts around what might be questions or areas of concern for people, I started to go into all the details of all the particular steps, and then I kind of took a step back and thought, all right, let's think about this. You know, for all parents, this parenting trip that we're on, the adventure, the journey, is both challenging and really exciting. And so, and in some cases, there are things that are very common across grade levels or age levels or different areas of need, like academics or social emotional growth, behavior, and things that are unique to yourselves. So I want to start there and have you think about this. And I would like this to be a little interactive, as much as you feel comfortable. So my question for you, what are your hopes and dreams for your child? If you would, turn and talk to a neighbor or someone near you, just share some thoughts. What are your hopes and dreams for your child?
Just to get him to graduate.
Be happy.
Enjoy school.
Be happy.
Happy, come home happy, graduate, enjoy going to school.
Enjoy going to school.
Sometimes the opportunities that are presented.
Okay, yeah. Take advantage of opportunities that are presented. I have 3 children, 9th grade, 7th grade, and 4th grade. And when I think of this question, I think I want them to be happy and healthy. You know, those are my 2 biggest pieces. Now, then when I think a little more, I think I also have pretty high expectations for them. And I want them to be successful, and I want them to meet those expectations as best that they can. But I think this is a really important question, and it's one that changes over time and can change depending on the circumstance. And, you know, I think that's something we all kind of, in thinking about how to support our children, those are the questions. You have those hopes and dreams that are maybe long-term, but also even hopes and dreams that could be really short-term. Or things that change. Maybe they're not so happy going to school right now, but they were last year or a couple years ago, or maybe they will be in a month, right? And what we want to do is work with you as in a partnership to figure that out and help to make that happen. Sometimes I also think too, I probably should ask my kids what their hopes and dreams are for themselves. So, a couple other questions then. What is already working? What is already working right now? And what is possible? So what's working, and can you keep those things going? Can you help to make those things continue to happen? Or even bring those things to your child's attention? Sometimes issues are short-lived, and oftentimes I know even for myself, I'm thinking, what happened? You like to do that. This happens with food for my kids a lot. You love hot dogs, now you don't like hot dogs anymore. What happened? But what was working, if it's working, great, and you try to keep those things going. If it changes, what could work now, or what is possible? And then what resources and knowledge do you already have available to you? What are the things that you already know? Maybe the people that you trust, that you've worked with before, or that a sister, a sibling, a mentor, someone that you've been able to talk to before who might have insight information, or can just be a critical listening partner to say, I'm really struggling with this right now. Can you listen to what's going on? We know that parents are kids' first and always teacher, right? We're our kids' first teacher, and we're their always teacher. And I still feel that way about my parents. My parents are still sometimes my teacher, or people that I rely upon. So we have knowledge, we have resources, and again, we are a resource too, and we're very resource rich in Brighton. I think we're very lucky. We have lots and lots of support here that you can tap into. One of the first things we say, and we encourage and recommend that you do, if you are facing a struggle or a challenge, if something's happening and going on, is your classroom teacher. So your first line of defense is always your classroom teacher. So these are our 3rd grade teachers, and our 4th grade team, and our 5th grade team. So when in doubt, that's
Clearly a much warmer day.
That is your first line of defense for concerns, as much as possible. There may be times or specific situations where maybe that doesn't work, but for the most part, we oftentimes recommend that. They want to know too. I think that's one of the biggest pieces. They may also then consult with other people or say, oh, I need to refer this to someone else, or I need help from someone else. But they want to know what's going on because they're with your child most of the time during the school day. And so it's helpful for them to know if you're seeing things at home. Oftentimes we have those conversations to say, is that the same kind of thing that we're seeing here at school? Then, well, hey, we got to work together because we could both benefit from problem solving and figuring things out. Or if it's different, why might it be different? And sometimes that'll happen where you can contact a teacher and the teacher will say, I'm not seeing anything. You're saying they don't want to come to school? Wow, they get here and they're fine, and they're talking with their friends, and they're doing the things they need to do. I have one who tends to sometimes be that way and will do things at home that I know he would not do at school and would not want people to know he does at school. So, but it's very helpful, and that's definitely a starting point. And then from there, we have a lot of other resources and other people. So I'm going to highlight different groups, but I'm going to ask Deanna to join me in this piece because there are also some pieces that I think she could highlight for us.
Sure.
Around the different support groups and different resources that we have.
So this is our mental health team. You see our school psychologist, Rachel Affronti, and our school counselor, Marguerite Opet. and our school social worker, Julie Bianchi, and our primary, I'm blanking. Primary project, I was gonna call it something different. Primary project, Sherry Valinsky, all a part of our counseling department. And we have a new addition, Ashley Ellis. She is a part of our mental health team. She's our behavior specialist. She's not working with every single child in the building. She is working with specific programs, specific classrooms, in particular youngsters who maybe have goals on their IEP around social, emotional, behavioral needs. So we're really, really excited to have this new resource. It is a resource for children. It's a support for children. It's also a resource and a teaching support for our staff to help us build capacity. When we look at what we call Tier 1, typically you'll see in a few minutes the triangle, and we talk about Tier 1 interventions, and I learned at a conference a few weeks ago, and I want to start to call it Tier 1 preventions, which I think is a better way for us to look at that. And Ashley comes with a wealth of background knowledge and experiences in some other specialized settings where she can help our special ed teachers and our general education teachers develop and grow more tools to keep in their toolkit when they want to use firsthand right within their classroom. So our mental health team, we're really excited about all of them. They also serve involved in our RTI process. All of those individuals, except for Sherry, is what we call an RTI case manager. And you'll hear some little pieces about RTI again in a few minutes there. All of these individuals, except for Sherry, whose role is a little bit different. Sherry pretty much works with third graders because Primary Project is a K-3 initiative, so we're lucky that we still have third graders and we can keep that project with us. Supporting children in a play-based environment, looking at also, again, maybe some social needs, maybe how to make friends, come out of their shell, lots of different nuances, more at a primary level, but they use it in a play-based environment in a room not too far from here right now, but again, targeted for third graders. She does have a few fourth graders that she keeps under her wing for a little while longer and then lets them fly. She also oversees our new student clubs, so children who, not all of our third graders who are new to French Road because they're all new, but who are new to our district. So she does interact with third, fourth, and fifth graders, and then mid-year there's a great celebration for all of them to celebrate Healthorg no longer newbies here at French Road anymore. They're all part of one of us. So Rachel, Marguerite, Julie, and Ashley are all supporting, and we're really excited, the new social emotional learning curriculum that we are rolling out. Some of you may have seen this in some of your staff, the teacher communication that has gone home, maybe in some district-wide newsletters, our e-news, around what's called Second Step. And that's our social emotional curriculum that we're rolling out in all of our classrooms, which is really fantastic. It's a way of also furthering Brighton Believes, our star qualities that we have embedded in everything we do throughout our Brighton community and our French Road community. There's pieces about bullying, there's pieces about developing your own self-character, finding your interests, finding your own niche. Lots of great units at each grade level. They're all different per grade level, and our mental health team is helping roll that out to our classroom teachers so that they can also roll that out on their own, and throughout the course of their school day, we're all using some of that same nomenclature, some of the same phrases to help our students. Again, another Tier 1 new prevention we're really excited about.
I think in that realm too, in social emotional learning, one of the things that sometimes we may overlook is kids really need direct instruction on that, on areas around using their name, asking for another person's name when you greet someone, just some of the basic things that sometimes I think we often may model or that we sometimes expect but don't always remind them in kind of a teaching framework and frame of mind. So I know, the learning they're doing through Second Step started at Council Rock for many kiddos but a lot of those concepts and skills come back around too. We're talking to kids about understanding personal space, understanding active listening, thinking about other people's feelings. We talk about a social filter. Some things we kind of keep in our thought bubble. We don't necessarily have to say out loud to everybody. So those are all parts of the second step curriculum and pieces that teachers do in the classroom all the time, but also our mental health staff helps with a ton for kids across all 3 grade levels. And then Allison and Deanna, they are also here to support you. And if you've talked with a classroom teacher and or a counselor, they're also then a next kind of go-to or a person to speak to about issues that arise or concerns that you have. We've done presentations similar to this before, and I was using some of the material that we have, and we had kind of a do's and don'ts. And one of the things that we often say is, don't wait too long, all right? But there's also a good balance. I think you also want to observe and have discussion with your child and kind of think about some of those questions at the beginning. What do you already know? What is already working? What are some things that you and your child can do together at home to problem solve, and then reach out to us? So finding that right balance, like don't panic, and don't panic and feel like you have to call immediately unless it's a safety issue. But also then find that right balance and don't wait too long either. Don't get to that point where, okay, this has been 3 weeks of a lot of struggle, of feeling very defeated, of being very upset, and waiting to that point to contact us. We want to know so that we can help, and we can, again, work together to do that sooner rather than later. So this is our special education staff or teachers. We have support teachers at all 3 grade levels, serving a wide range of needs for students with IEPs. And I don't know, Deanna, if you want to go through like specific grade levels with folks.
Sure. So Wendy, I'll just go right along the top and we'll work our way down each row. Wendy Romano is a 12-1-1 teacher at grade 3, supporting students in that program. Marcy Shapiro is what we call ICT, Integrated Co-Taught. That means that throughout the course of a youngster's day, there are 2 adults potentially for specific content area or subject area. It might be Mrs. Shapiro in the room supporting ELA or mathematics. There could be a teaching assistant that's all in there that helps create smaller instructional groups throughout the day, or there's some indirect consultation that happens with Marcy. The same happens with Wendy Romano during 12-1-1 time for ELA and for math. There are no more than 12 students during those 2 subject areas. Katie Drake is our 12-1-4 teacher, grades 3, 4, 5. Whitney Smith is 12-1-1 at grade 4. Anna Schneider is a consultant teacher supporting students across all 3 grade levels in our building. Consultant teacher is a push-in support into the general education classroom. There can be some direct support attached to that, but also some indirect consultation with the classroom teachers. Mr. Reichman, Jeff Reichman, is a special education teacher. He is a consultant teacher and resource room provider. That means that youngsters may spend time out of the general education classroom working with him. He is working primarily right now this year, grade 5. Mrs. Sham is an integrated co-taught teacher at grade 5. Mr. Osborne, 12-1-1, grade 5. Mrs. Tantillo is an integrated co-taught teacher at grade 4. And Ms. Calamia is another consultant teacher, resource room teacher, working at grades 3 and 4.
And then this is our support staff in the area of academic intervention services, so AIS. These are all of our different providers. So Patty French is our math specialist, so she works specifically with students in the area of math support. Jen Gallo and Courtney Rowe Lenahan are our reading teachers and work specifically in the area of reading with students 3, 4, 5. Mr. Hurley, Ms. Syracusa, and Mrs. Francati are all working in AIS in both math or ELA and support all 3 grade levels. And then Deanna, will you talk about Christine?
Mr. Twain is also supporting AIS. He does have some AIS groups, but he's also what we call our responsibility coach, which is something we're really excited about. We have the opportunity for students to have working lunches. For some kids, the cafeteria isn't the most comfortable environment, either socially, behaviorally, or it's an opportunity for kids to have some quiet time during lunchtime to maybe get some work finished. And so we have an alternative lunch location in our old main lobby, and Mr. Duane is going to be overseeing some of that. Some of our children also maybe need some executive functioning coaching or check-ins and check-outs at the end of the day. Do they have everything that they need? How are they doing with their planner? Or they maybe need just somebody else to connect with that's not their classroom teacher. I just need somebody in my corner that supports me and what I'm doing and is there to cheer me on if I need some extra support. And Mr. Duane is providing that for some of our youngsters. Mrs. Allinger has been a part of the AIS department. She's currently a tutor that's working within our 1214 program, helping that program and those children there.
So students who are receiving AIS, and again, we keep referencing the triangle, which I do have later in the power slides. Academic intervention services would be considered a tier 2 level of support in our response to intervention system. So in the thinking about it kind of organizationally and structurally, students who are receiving AIS are identified by a team of these teachers and in conjunction with classroom teachers and Deanna and myself, looking at student performance and data. So we have beginning of year assessments along with the New York State assessments, which we got their information fairly late this year. The state test results came in pretty late, so we are still making some adjustments in that regard in terms of identifying students who would receive support. You should get notification of that though in the mail. And then the services would start. Oftentimes that support is provided during what we call win time here at French Road, which happens differently in different buildings. So like at Council Rock, kids were just scheduled in conjunction, like the AIS provider would schedule with the classroom teacher and would group kids based on need. And kids might come from a couple different classrooms, but we didn't technically call it win time. K-5, that it's still fairly fluid in terms of schedule. When you get to TCMS, then that time has to be scheduled into their blocks and skinnies. And oftentimes, might juxta against PE or a study hall or their foreign language class. And it gets a little tricky at that middle school to fit all those pieces in given the way their schedule works.
What's really great about the win time, when I need time, I want to call it when time, what everybody needs, but win time sounds better, is that no new instruction is happening at that time. So if a youngster does leave the classroom for some support, whatever subject area or whatever that looks like, they're not missing anything. And that we've had in place now, this is our 3rd year with this model. So that's really nice too, that nobody feels like, oh, I have to catch up, something else happened without me. So again, everyone is getting what they need.
We review the student information, the students' performance data a couple different times in the year to make determinations about students who receive service and also students who might exit. So we will keep checking on their progress, and there are points at which if they are moving towards or they start to perform at grade level, then they may not need that support anymore, and we would communicate that as well, letting you know that they might come out of win time and back into their classroom environment. In addition, Deanna and I meet regularly with AIS providers to really talk specifically about students' progress through that support. And teachers are collecting data and information on how kids are performing on the skills and concepts that they're working on. All right, and then some of our other support services. So our therapists, we have speech therapists, an occupational therapist, and a physical therapist. And so these folks here, they are really those experts in those specific areas. I don't know if I do a great description of OT-PT. I don't know.
So occupational therapy, OT, fine motor, your small muscles. PT, physical therapy, gross motor, your large muscles. So if you think about things, when you had toddlers, picking up Cheerios off a tray, there's your fine motor. That would be, if that was something that someone couldn't do at that point in time, that would be an occupational therapy. Now, obviously, that's a developmental milestone I'm using to pick out at this point. Both of them collaborate pretty nicely when it comes to some youngsters with low muscle tone. Some low muscle tone needs might show themselves with some of those fine motor pieces, with holding a pencil, being able to motor plan, thinking about things in your head, and then sending that muscle message down your arm to be able to carry that out. Do you want to add something, Carolyn?
I do. I'm Carolyn, Student Services. Nice to see everybody. I just wanted to add, because sometimes there's confusion with speech and OT and PT, that those services at the school are to help kids be successful at school. So although a student may have an articulation concern, it may not be impacting their ability to access school, so we would not provide that service. And that's where sometimes the confusion lies. So we might have a student who has a significant physical disability that is able to access the school, then they may not receive that PT or OT in school. Doesn't mean they don't need it, but it means we would access it, you would access it outside of school. Does that make sense? So that's sometimes, I think, where the confusion lies when we have meetings about services.
So in speech therapists, serve in the capacity of communication and language, but that includes expressive, so kids being able to express their ideas through language, receptive, where they're taking in information and trying to understand and process that information, and then pragmatics, what we call pragmatics, which is that social emotional range. Although students may not always qualify for the services, these folks are great resources to all our teachers, and they work with so many teachers across the building, utilizing strategies with students that you will see many teachers, and I think a lot of our classroom teachers are very well versed in supporting kids if they don't qualify directly for a pull-out or a push-in service. Just because we're saying they don't really, the need is not so drastic within the school environment, they're doing pretty well. That doesn't mean that your teachers aren't aware of and utilizing strategies that support our students if there is a need in that area, or that they wouldn't, and because they do it all the time, go down the hallway to check in with Gen Radar and say, hey, I'm having trouble with this right now with this student. What are some ideas or suggestions? What could I do to help this student out? And then we have 2 teachers at this building who are called ENL teachers. So they're English as a new language teachers, meaning they work with our students who are learning English as their new language or a second or third language. And they do a lot. They have both some groups where students would be pulled out, or they push in and support those students within the classroom to help develop students' language. And then we have instructional coaches. So Stefana is our MST, or Math, Science, Technology coach, and Stacy Wolk-Ostrin is our literacy coach. These teachers both will be in classrooms and working with students across potentially any classroom, but they're really there to support also the teachers in the instructional framework. So they assist with helping teachers prepare for our state assessments, understand what we need, what we are working towards. Right now, New York State has done recent revisions to the New York State standards in English, language arts, and math. They came out last year, and the state has a process, a 4-year plan of having teachers implement these new standards, and the assessments will change to go along with those new standards. So these folks help us and help the teachers to understand and know what those changes are, where we might need to focus on a particular skill or concept, and whether or not that might have changed from the Common Core standards, which were what we were utilizing before. Any questions at this point so far?
The social worker, I understand that she was to be moving up to high school, is that right?
So, do you want to, Deanna, I don't know the exact plan right now.
That is correct. We are mad at her about that. No, just all joking aside, we are very happy for her. She is going to be working over at the high school. And we do have a new social worker who will be starting November 19th.
That's what I didn't know. I knew they were in the process, but I didn't know where you were.
Yes, we'll be beginning November 19th. There will be a transition period where they will be working together. And the wonderful great thing is that Mrs. Bianchi will not be that far away. So if our new social worker needs anything, it's a phone call and a quick drive away.
Has the name of the new person become public?
No, not yet. We will be announcing that formally in one of our e-news and a letter, and she'll probably be introducing herself as well. And now you know she's a she.
Julie will stay on board then
Yes,
until that time.
Yep.
So she would be the person to call, and
Yep.
then, up until
up until
the
this
19th.
point.
All right. Any other questions? So one of the pieces that we were talking about in planning this workshop was just thinking about what is typical. What is typical at 3rd grade, at 4th grade, at 5th grade? What can I expect? Now, I kind of feel like everything with a grain of salt, because I don't know what typical sometimes is or is not. And I think in a lot of cases, there are general markers that we know. We would definitely say, you're, as Deanna was talking about with pinching to pick up materials. If a student is still at that stage right now at 3rd grade, then we're concerned, and they're getting a lot of support to work on that skill. So there are some markers that are pretty clear, but there are also a lot of blurred lines. And I think from my experience at Council Rock when we were doing looping, it was always the trickiest for a teacher who ended 2nd grade and went back to 1st in that loop, because you don't always realize the difference between an end of 2nd grade 3rd grader and a beginning 1st grader who's an end of kindergarten student. We're way out of tying shoes by the end of 2nd grade, but at the beginning of 1st grade, you're not going to be for some kids. And so it sometimes is a shock in that way in thinking about that. So I have a couple of resources here. These are not the end-all be-all. And I definitely do think your pediatrician is always a good resource also, and obviously when we go for those well visits, we always get all that paper, all the information that tells you what would be typical and whatnot. But these were a couple of sources that I found and I thought were worth sharing. And I probably could do it in the PowerPoint, but I just don't always trust it. I thought this was a really great website and has a lot of resources there. It's called understood.org. I don't know if anybody else is familiar with this. And again, this has a lot of information. It has a little bit of a bent or slant, I would say, because if you see, it's for learning and attention issues, so there is maybe a little bit of a focus on that particular, on attention and whatnot. But I thought this was really great because it's fairly simple, it's fairly straightforward, but thinking about some of those milestones for 2nd, goal 3rd. And again, it had a lot of additional information, but I loved it at a glance. So in 2nd and 3rd grade, they're starting to understand more complicated concepts, so cause and effect. Again, this is a range. Some kids, even in 2nd grade, would understand cause and effect. I think we're starting in 3rd to sometimes move to, I understand a little bit about cause and effect when I'm involved in it. So, I now realize that, when I say something to someone and it's not very kind, that they are going to have a reaction, and maybe one I didn't intend, or I didn't realize, or I didn't want. So you're starting to get to that point. They're becoming better at writing complete sentences and using basic punctuation. I know that we do focus on that. We focus on capitalization and punctuation. And as much as we focus on that, I would say teachers, even into the middle school, will always, in my ELA meetings, say they're still not, doing the right punctuation. Sometimes it's not that they can't or they don't know it. It's whether they actually apply those skills across levels. So, but they are beginning to be able to have complete ideas that they're getting down in their writing, and with some level of organization. Maybe not to the degree that you always like or want, but that is also the role of the teacher. That's what we work on during writing workshop and during writing time, is supporting kids in understanding what their writing should look like and what it means to organize your writing. All right, and peers become a big influence. And again, so this site has a lot of, it goes into details again on physical and cognitive and language milestones. What I did like about this was it actually also gave you some examples of typical academics, and has, I'm not going to show these per se, but again, you know, you have access to this website, and if you go on understood.org, they actually have videos of students doing different things and showing students what they might look like as a typical third grader, fourth grader. So this is a great resource in terms of if you're not really sure and you wanted to, you know, find out a little bit more or see someone else in action, you could take a look at some of these videos. Oh, and I should go back one more time. So that was third grade. It's probably easiest, I put the fourth and fifth grade link specifically in the PowerPoint too. So fourth and fifth grade. And again, I really do think, you know, like that first to second and the ending and beginnings, but third to fifth is another huge chunk. And sometimes they surprise you, you know, you don't realize it or you don't see it right away. It's kind of like when they shoot up sometimes, wow, you all of a sudden look tall to me, or I think you grew overnight, you know. So typical milestones for fourth and fifth grade, yeah, we start to get a little bit more into body image and into pieces where they're recognizing, knowing that their body's changing, and may or may not know how to feel about that. We start to really, I think, start to get into more of that point of view piece and different point of views. We definitely do that in our ELA and social studies curriculum. We talk about the point of view of the narrator, of the characters in a story, of historical figures in time, and talk a lot through the curriculum at 4 and 5 around that piece, and helping, trying to help kids understand how to see different points of view and looking and compare different ways that people might think about an event in history. And again, the peer piece becomes increasingly, that doesn't change for a while. I think that one starts to become more and more true just as they progress. And then again, there are a lot more pieces in here specifically about then physical, cognitive, and social emotional milestones. I know that PTSA is putting together a presentation, well, similar to this for the PTSA group at Council Rock around independence and talking about independence for K-1-2 students. And we would always say at Council Rock, even in the kindergarten orientation, we would always say, don't do for them what they can do for themselves. I would say at this 3, 4, 5 level that it's still true, and maybe more so in the sense that start to figure out what they can do for themselves too, more and more in terms of areas that you might not think about, you know, because I do think now you're starting to look at not only just developing their independence, but those pieces where they need to take on that responsibility for themselves. And the more they take on that responsibility and ownership for things that you're working with them on, that's the same thing in terms of their learning and their education. We continually talk about that with kids too, in terms of starting to take ownership of their learning, and to bring in their interests and start to think about who they are when it comes to their learning. Thinking about what they like to read, what they choose when they go to the library. All those places and pieces are ways for you to support them at home. So again, there are also videos for 4th and 5th grade on the side about what writing looks like, what some of the other, I think there's also a math video on their video page. But just a good resource and something that you could refer to. The last one I'll show you because I wanted to there are lots and lots of different resources and I didn't want to, I didn't go into an exhaustive list, but I also wanted you to see kind of just that comparison of that's not what I wanted to do. Something that might be is a little more around some of the, so this comes from the Center for Disease Control, so it's maybe a little more medical, but I did think they have positive parenting tips on the one page, and this is, so it's not all medical, but it does again go over milestones, and I think it's good to look at maybe multiple resources, because one, again, there's kind of a range and a continuum. So if you go on one site and you look and it says, oh, my child should be able to face academic challenges, and they're falling apart when they walk in the door every night. Again, I don't want you to panic thinking, oh my gosh, they're not meeting that milestone, or this is such a, this is an issue we can't overcome. It becomes more about, okay, let's think about this. What was working before? What are some possibilities of what could be going on? And then we can work together to support your child. I will say Reading Rockets is another really good resource. I probably should have or could have included that. Oh, I do have some more. So these are a few others. The American School Psychologist website, there were some resources on there. I like kidshealth.org. That's just one I've kind of used before. It's got a really nice section on, it has pieces for educators, parents, and students. And that's one of the pieces I would say, that one in particular, that might also be something that you could do with a student is, hey, you know what? Or especially on a topic maybe you don't feel as comfortable about, or you're feeling like I'm going to try and address this with my child and they may not take it from me so well. Sometimes being able to put them onto resources themselves and saying, hey, you know what? I keep talking to you about maybe needing to use deodorant, and you're not thinking that that you need to. You're not agreeing with me on this one. Let me share this with you, and it's in kid-friendly language and can be helpful. So just a couple of other resources that you can access from here. All right, so now the famous pyramid that we keep talking about. So the technical kind of stuff for RTI is response to intervention. It really is, I believe, like Deanna said, a proactive or preventative model or way of thinking. We're looking to try to adjust and work on the environment, the academic environment or the social environment, to support a student and see if they respond to that change or to that intervention or strategy that we try. Tier 1 is, so Tier 1 are our universal classroom level supports. So some of these supports are just things that we could implement within a classroom that might assist a student. It could be preferential seating. Right, I noticed that the student is more engaged, more focused if I place them in the front. Or it could be I have to place them in the back because they need to get up and walk around, and then it's not distracting to them or others. It could be just ways in which teachers adjust or modify curriculum and instruction. It could be making the font larger or less tasks on a page. So there are all kinds of different strategies and tools that we use at Tier 1. And the Second Step program is one of those examples where all kids are having access to that curriculum, supporting them in their social emotional development and growth. But there are tons and tons of ways that our teachers do this right now. And then what happens is, if a teacher is struggling, they can bring a student then or refer a student to our RTI team. So we have it's a multidisciplinary team. We bring folks together. Many of the specialists that you saw in the pictures, so our reading teachers or our math specialists, often serve as a case manager where they kind of facilitate a meeting of the group, and we pull together and we problem solve. A teacher can refer a student, a classroom teacher, but also specialists that might work with that student, a counselor, any of the folks in our building, a special area teacher can refer a student to RTI.
And a parent.
Or a parent. So, and that just basically says, we have an issue that we want to work on, we're going to get together and work on it together and problem solve. Tier 2 would be strategies then oftentimes in RTI will come up with strategies that might be considered Tier 1 strategies or Tier 2 strategies. AIS is another Tier 2 strategy, so that's something where not all students get AIS support or service, but it's a general education support, and we identify students who we think would benefit from that, and they would enter into AIS and be supported in that way. But our RTI team comes together based on a need, and they come up with a plan, so they problem solve together, and come up with a plan where they're going to try something out. So we're going to decide on an intervention that we want to try for a period of time, and we are very systematic about trying that strategy out and really collecting data to see if it works. So we modify or we change something, we focus on it for a period of time. I sat in today at TCMS on one of their RTI meetings, and one of the things we were talking about was a student who's very quiet and is having some academic struggles, but we're kind of not sure always where the struggle stems from. And the goal we came up with, the targeted intervention, was we're going to come up with a strategy that he is going to implement in each of the classrooms around asking for help. It serves two purposes. We're hoping that the communication will be, that may prompt him to be more communicative, and letting us know, because we're putting some responsibility on him, but we're also saying to the teachers that also is your way of finding out more when we're not sure. So we've seen him do some things where, okay, we're not sure if this is, he may not ask for help, but we help him and he is responsive to the help, but we're not really sure why he needed that help completely yet. So we're hoping that by asking him to self-advocate and saying to him, here's what you need to do that, and we're going to track and see how many times you do it in classes, that we can start to gauge, is that he's asking for help when he doesn't understand a direction, or he's asking for help when he doesn't know how to get started on a problem, or that will help our teachers to know more information. So we've planned 4 weeks out to trial this and come back together in 4 weeks to share out what we find and make some plans from there. All right. And then Tier 3 is our most intensive level. Oftentimes that's when we get to support services that might be part of an individual education plan or a 504 plan. It's where we're working with our therapists and some of the folks that you saw in our PowerPoint before that. That oftentimes occurs after we've gone through RTI maybe multiple times. So we've been trying, and we may get to that point where we say, you know what, we also might do some assessments and more testing to find out more around what is the area of need for a student and make a more individual plan and a plan with more specialized instruction for a student if the need presents itself. So some of this is a little bit of a repeat, but we are all on the same team, and we want to be a team with you. And we think it is really important that there is that back and forth communication. This is a lifelong journey, and it is one where we're on a continuum. So I think that is another piece of the pie, and we really try to be as proactive and preventative as we can in terms of helping and supporting a student. I've sat in on a lot of CSE meetings with Carolyn, and I know she often says, we may not leave with an IEP plan, but we will leave with a plan. Because when we come together for a student and we're talking about the needs that they have, we're going to come up with strategies and ways to support that student, whether or not that means that it's through an IEP or not, or through an RTI plan. That would be, I guess, the other thing I would say. When you call school, we may decide, a parent may want to refer to RTI, but there are a lot of things we can do before we even may go to the problem-solving process. And we may not need RTI if we're communicating and we figure out what's going on and what the student's need is, and we can address it just through some of the Tier 1 strategies. A lot of teachers are able to do that just as easily. And we do review, though, all of the RTI plans that we do create. Again, we go through that cyclical process, so we're reviewing the plans, we're seeing what's working and keeping those things, revising if something isn't working, to continue to adjust and adapt. Any questions?
When it comes to the Tier 1 and Tier 2, are the parents involved in those meetings and discussions with the teachers and with the counsellors?
If it's an RTI meeting, yes, we often pull in parents. For Tier 1, some of those things you may not be part of. Because again, some of those things are really great, just instructional strategies. If a teacher feels like, though, they're doing something where they might think they're gonna move to a Tier 2, they're gonna let you know that. So if they start to implement interventions in the classroom where they're feeling like, okay, I'm having to do this all the time or often, or I also know that it's working right now, but we might need more or different, then you'll start to hear that. But there are definitely some things that teachers would also do that you may not hear about. But there is communication. The RTI plans are written down. You know, we keep notes on those, on the plans. And if you don't, for some reason, get that communication, just, again, call the classroom teacher to say, hey, did I miss something? Or was there a meeting? So that you can get that information. Any other questions? Anything that you would want to know more about, or things that maybe weren't included, or resources that you're interested, because we can pursue. Again, I gave you a handful of different websites, or if anyone has websites that they have used or resources that they use that they've liked.
So what is the difference between a 504 plan and an IEP?
Yeah, no, go on that in for that one.
An IEP is through the special education process, and part of what New York State puts out for us is we have to determine what's called eligibility. And the New York State guidelines show 13 classifications or areas that we can consider a youngster eligible for an IEP plan with a disability. So I'll use the group to see if you can help me with this one. There's other health impairment, learning disability, speech impaired. I'm gonna try to get myself all the way to you can test me. Visual impairment, deaf or hearing impaired, multiple disabilities, intellectual disabilities, I'm only up to 7. Traumatic brain injury is another consideration, and you can actually see those in Part 200 regulation. What we have to look at, though, is, for example, a youngster, I'm going to use the example of a youngster with ADHD. That could fall under the auspice of another health impairment, because we have to then look at how significantly, however, does that impact a youngster from being successful in the classroom, above and beyond what everyone else in the classroom may need. When we look at frequent prompts, or maybe reminders, or different seating location, if your teacher's providing that for all of their students in what's really good instruction, a youngster's not going to need an IEP or a 504 plan for that. We also have to do, in order for an IEP, we have to do some educational, psychological, sometimes speech and language testing, and also some testing then in the physical arena, both for occupational therapy and for physical therapy also. We may be in consultation with your pediatrician or outside medical providers. But again, the significant piece is that we have also, at this age level, we're using a response to intervention model. We can't just say just because someone has a diagnosis or because they have a particular score on one of those assessments that I described that they are automatically eligible for an IEP. We have to look at what have we done and tried, all of our resources, have we exhausted everything that's in place, not exhausting people, but have we used every resource possible that every general education student has access to? If the answer is yes, and we are still not seeing continued growth and movement and progress towards a goal, then a youngster might be found eligible for an IEP. If not, as Carolyn says, we leave a meeting with a plan, and that might then fall under an RTI plan. A 504, which was the question was, that actually falls under different legislation. That's federal legislation that an individual then has what is a major life impairment. And we have to look at then again, what is the major life impairment here in school and the impact here in school as well. We have 504 plans for youngsters with some medical needs, and that's where we are then consulting with your pediatrician, and we're looking for your support in terms of not only the diagnosis, but then what is that impairing condition. We have youngsters, I'm using ADHD as an example, but some youngsters who with some simple accommodations and some simple plans within the context of general education do quite well. Some youngsters do need some more modifications, some more instructional support that may mean maybe some additional time within the classroom, maybe chunking of assignments. I'm using this just as an example, and that's where we would want to put that on paper so that from teacher to teacher, from year to year, we're always looking at what someone needs and that's in place for them. There's a wide variety of accommodations that can be in place on both the 504 and an IEP. Actually, when printed out on paper, they look an awful lot alike. The IEP is a different, more involved process in terms of especially the assessment. Carol, do you want to add anything on that?
You did an amazing job. I want to add, and I know I probably sound like a broken record, but this is where the conversations, there's confusion. Again, you can have a disability in our setting, in school. You could have attention deficit, we'll use that one. There's two prongs. How is it impacting your ability to perform at school? So some families, they have taught, or some children, all families have tried to teach, right? But some children have picked up different coping strategies at whatever age, and they're doing okay in school, and they're getting, and they're able to continually to make progress. So yes, the disability didn't go away. They have an attention deficit, but it's not impacting significantly their ability to perform at school. So that could be any disability. It could be a learning disability. Sometimes it's impacting you when you're in third grade, but then you learn those compensatory skills through the IEP or the 504 and in your family and all of the people involved, and then you no longer need that support. So I think that's a really important part of the special education process, and the 504 process is you put it in place to even the playing field. When we've built up those skills, then we would, what it's called a declassification document, because now the child, the disability didn't go away, but they've learned how to use those strategies, and so they no longer need those supports. Does that make sense?
I'm going to jump in also with the biggest difference between a 504 and an IEP would be programs and related services. So when you saw the special education teachers listed there, some of those programs all of those programs, with a 504 plan, a youngster would not be accessing those programs. Those are only accessible through an IEP, an individualized education plan. For the most part, students can access speech and language and OT and PT on a case-by-case basis through a 504. But once we start to have a plan where we have a lot of related services, including counseling that might fall on a 504, then we might also take a look at an IEP. But that is the biggest difference between the two, is the access to the special education programming. You can't access that through a 504.
Are there any other questions?
Well, again, as I think we said from the start, reach out at any point. If you do have questions or if you think of things at other times, my email is just the school email. I'm happy to help or to kind of refer you to someone who might have the answer if I don't have it, to support in that process. But that's one of the biggest pieces I would say is definitely communicate and let us know, and we're here to help.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District's PTSA.